Well, if you've been here last week, you would have caught up with the story that we had of Jesus healing somebody who was blind, giving sight back to somebody. And we're following on from that story here today. Jesus has, in the same area, the same crowd. I think in the translation that was up on there, he says he's addressing the Pharisees. What I do is kind of addressing the crowd and the audience again. And Jesus throughout has been talking about kind of two sides. And if you haven't tracked with that yet, you will find that there are two sides. We don't have... Sorry, is it not there? No. There we go. We have two sides throughout the scriptures. There's no middle ground. If you've been living a life and thinking, well, you know, I can be kind of in the middle, like you're a centrist, you don't like to choose a side, you know, you're watching a game on TV and you're like, I don't mind if both teams win. Doesn't work here. This is not going to work for us as Christians, or if you're not a Christian, it's certainly not going to work for you at all. You're into some bad states if you're not a Christian. There are two sides. And so Jesus is continuing here. And he talks about sheep. Now I've been looking forward to this piece because I love to talk about sheep. I don't know, anybody else here you can throw up your hand. Anybody here do ag science in school? Like anybody have an agricultural class? Yeah, Buddy did back then. Yep. I figured our country people at very least would do an ag science class. We had to take agricultural science. My school I went to in high school, not my other school was just tiny, but we had a lot of land. My high school had heaps of land, so we had a farm on the high school. And so every kid had to take ag science. And I remember I got the top mark in class once in ag science. And so I got to decide whether I wanted to dock the sheep or give them an injection. Now, if I'm going to go through all the things a sheep need, the docking means basically putting a rubber ring or cutting the tails off sheep. If you don't know that, sheep are born with tails. Some people don't know, but they're actually born with quite a long tail, and then you cut them off. Jesus starts talking about sheep. And one reason he talks about sheep is because really in our reality we've got a lot of similarities to sheep. Sheep are one of the most difficult animals to take care of. I don't know if you've ever been out, but you know, if you go out to the country, you might come across a wild pig. You might come across a wild goat. We have wild horses. We even have wild camels, wild buffalo, wild cattle. Pretty rare you're ever going to come across a wild sheep, because sheep don't survive very well in the wild. Kind of like humans, we don't survive very well in the wild either. Sheep need to be shorn. If you don't shear a sheep, the wool gets so thick and heavy that it weighs them down, the sheep dies. Sheep need to be dipped. So you've got to dump them under completely to get rid of all the parasites that live in the wool. They've got to be drenched. So you hold their mouths open, you stick this thing inside, you squirt it down. Let's get drenching. Sometimes you see that when people are getting drunk. They have these things on the farm. Maybe you don't have those like in the city, but in the farming parties they often take a drenching down. Sheep have to be crushed. So you've got to cut the wool around their backside off all the time. Otherwise it's called fly blind. It's all maggy. Sheep need to be, if you want to breed sheep for wool, the male sheep, and if you want to breed them for the meat, all male sheep are castrated. So in the things called wethers, so you've got to castrate them. And they have to have their tails cut off or docked and rubber rings on. Sheep take a lot of care. Farmers who have sheep have to go out every day. So you can have a cattle farm, you can leave your cattle out there. In fact, some places they leave them for once a year and they bring the cattle in. On sheep farms, you've got to go out every single day to take care of it. Sheep are not very intelligent. Now, a lot of animals are not very intelligent, but sheep are one of the least intelligent animals out there. If you've ever seen sheep driving in country, one of the things you've got to really watch for is if the entire flock of sheep is on the left-hand side of the road and one decides to cross, they'll all cross. Right? When we used to do docking on farms, so you rings on, a sheep would run out of the pens and they would jump. Just jump. And every sheep that would follow would jump at the same time. There's nothing there, right? They're not jumping over anything. They just don't have the brain capacity to figure out, I don't have to jump now. We're kind of like that, right? Humans follow leaders. I was thinking about this earlier today, that if you hold to evolution, so if you hold that we have evolved as a creature from whatever we started as, some kind of amoeba, we kind of grow our way up and we follow that evolution. Evolution went really bad at one point because humans are one of the least capable creatures on the planet of surviving from an early age on their own. I mean, look at little Tommy. He's pretty useless. He's broken his leg already. Now, if he was an animal in the wild, by this age he'd be up on his own, he'd be surviving, he'd be able to hunt. As a human, right? He might as well get put down at this point, right? He can't survive on his own. Humans are useless. We're one of the weakest creatures in pound for pound. We're one of the slowest creatures. We have no natural weapons on us. Our teeth, our hands don't do much at all. We can't see in the dark. Our hearing is not very good, especially here, right? There's some people here who can't hear at all because you've got hearing aids. We're pretty useless if you take away all the extra things that we're given. We're very useless. Now, if we've evolved, I don't know where it went wrong, but we're starting to go downhill. Even the strongest humans are no match for the creatures in the wild. No match at all. It take a long time. And so Jesus is talking about us as sheep because we require so much care. We're in a place where we require care. And so Jesus talks about this, and at other points, he talks about he's a shepherd. He's a shepherd there because we need so much care. We need daily care. If you think you can go a long time as a Christian without that daily care, then that daily care comes from a number of things. It comes from reading the Bible. It comes from praying. It comes from gathering around other Christians. You go very far without those things. We're like sheep that haven't been checked on regularly. We get fly blown, our wool gets too long, we get parasites in us, we get all those kinds of ailments that sheep get because we're not getting cared for by the shepherd on a daily basis. Now, one of the differences in what's talked about here and Jesus talking about and what we live in now in things, if you've ever been again into farm areas, in Australia, in most parts of the world now, sheep are driven from behind. Sheep, you have sheepdogs, maybe you have a motorbike, maybe you've got a horse, you're driving the sheep from the back. But what Jesus is talking about here, in some cultures, especially with small groups of sheep, the sheep were led from the front. So the shepherd would be in front of the sheep and he would go and the sheep would follow him. Sometimes you see that more in a dairy farm here. Maybe the farmer goes out and calls the cows in and they follow him in. But that's the case here. And so Jesus is saying that he's the shepherd that's going to lead us. He takes us into good places. Now Jesus also says he's the gate. And this sometimes particularly when John's writing things, sometimes like, hang on, Jesus, if you're the sheep, how can you be the gate at the same time? So I was trying to wrestle with this one. I was like, that's just kind of weird sometimes. Like is he just using some weird things and going? But then I found out that one of the common things that the shepherds would do, so they would build their pens at night. Sometimes there would be places that they were going, they'd move the sheep in. And at the gateway, the shepherd would sleep in front of the pen. So he would become the actual gate itself. He would physically become the gate. For two things. One, he would keep the sheep in, and two, he'd keep the predators out. So he didn't have like a closing gate, he would just lie across there. And Jesus in this passage is saying, that's what I am. I'm the gatekeeper. Because I'm a good shepherd, and that's what good shepherds do. I protect my flock from the outside, and I also keep them in care. Because as sheep, we will go astray if we're not being cared for and led the right way. So he just talks about that, the gate or the door. He says, that's what I am. I'm the gate or the door. I'm here to keep you in the right places. I'm here to help you. So Jesus protects us. He protects his own. Jesus also says he's going to lead us into pastures. Leads us into good pastures. Now, again, I love the rural analogies. It's a little hard here. I've actually become a little soft living in the city for a long time. I like it when it doesn't rain. Right? I kind of enjoy it when it doesn't rain. I love to bike ride. And I think, the rain gets in the way. But if you're in a rural context, you know that without rain, you don't get very far. And I look at my backyard now and I'm thinking, it's not a good place when it doesn't rain. My grass is pretty brown. It's kind of getting low, right? It doesn't thrive. And so Jesus talks about taking into the pastures. And when you go into places and you see what a flourishing pasture is, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to see a flourishing pasture. Flourishing pasture is pretty good too. And I'll reference back, I'll read you one of the Psalms which was written by David, and David was a shepherd. This was his job, and so he really understood this. And this is from Psalm 23. David says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake." Now, in this passage, David mentions the idea of green pastures. And one day I was reading this some years ago, and I was really struck. I said, green pastures? Like, that's That's what's the word there, Joyce? Can you give me as a school teacher or when green comes before pasture, like something comes before a noun, what do you call that? Adjective. An adjective. Okay. So he's got an adjective here, right? There's not a lot of that in Scripture when it comes to colour. Not often is a colour used before a description. And so I went and I researched this for quite some time to try to figure out what was going on. And there's an association between the colour green and how we feel. It's why you may find at times when you're driving places or walking or catching the bus or coming into an area, when there's more greenery, we tend to feel better about ourselves. And so there's quite a bit of scientific research that says green spaces make us feel better, they make us more peaceful. We used to do some research stuff on even just how people responded to each other. When there was more green and more parkland, people were more likely to stop and chat to each other than when you're in the hustle and bustle of a tight city where you don't see much green. And so in this place, God is saying that actually green pastures, where there's greenery, where there's things, there's a lushness, and it creates a peace within us. And so sheep going into a green pasture would feel better about themselves. Right? They know it's lush. They know they're not going to have to fight for their survival. They know that things are going to be well provided for. The same as we would if we went into that same space. There's a place of peace and there's a place of tranquility. And so Jesus gives us these things. He says he's going to take us into these places where we're just going to feel better about ourselves. Jesus also talks about abundance. And in the passage about abundance, Jesus is talking about giving us things. Now, sometimes I think about abundance as being money. And I was chatting with somebody this morning. I was out early with a group of Christian guys, and we were chatting, and we were talking about some sports stuff. And if you might know, like I'll take you through these journeys. A couple of rugby league guys just sold signs for over $1 million a year. I thought, that's a lot of money. Right? It takes a long time for most of us in this congregation. It's going to take us a really long time to ever earn $1 million total. Like even if we add it up over the years, it's a lot of money. And then I was referencing a story of a guy who used to play for the South Sydney Rabbitohs and he now plays for the Philadelphia Eagles in the US. His name is Jordan Malata. And Jordan is, I just got a photo of him the other day with a friend of mine. Jordan's a monstrous guy. Like my friend is really big and he's standing next to him and he makes my friend look tiny. And Jordan just signed a contract that is more than the entire South Sydney team's budget for a year. So he's getting $15 million a year. So imagine that, $15 million a year to play sport. $15 million, he signed for 10 years. Sorry, he signed for 5 years, so $75 million. That's amazing. But then there's a soccer player, and I'm sure some of you know this, that Neymar just signed in Saudi Arabia, and I saw his things, and Sam, you can jump in if I get this one wrong, because I didn't get a chance to fact check, but I think he signed for over $100 million a year. Over $100 million a year. And he gets a 25-bedroom mansion on top of that. He gets at least 8 different cars. He's got a team of servants for him. He's got a driver. He's got a private jet on call. And they did say this, and I don't know if it's confirmed, but every time he tweets and mentions something good about Saudi Arabia, they give him $500,000 additional. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. I don't think Neymar's going to be any happier than Jordan Malata or Payne Haas or anybody in this congregation because he has so much stuff. And so when Jesus talks about this abundance, he's not talking about an abundance of wealth, because the abundance of wealth doesn't make us any happier. People always want more. The guys I was with this morning have a lot more money than I have, and one of them said to me recently, he goes, Coz, I spent my whole life at this point working so hard because I thought my goal was to get as much money as possible. And he goes, I'm no happier than I was when I started. And he goes, now what I realize is I don't have any time left to spend all this stuff that I've got. Because I'm no happier than before I started this journey. We'd all like more, but it never stops. In fact, in economics it's called the marginal propensity to consume. We always want more than what we have. We always want the next level up. The richest people in the world are driven to make more money. They're no more content. And so in this, Jesus is not saying you're going to be happy and content by having more money. He says, I'm going to give you an abundance. But an abundance of love, an abundance of peace, an abundance of joy, an abundance of faith, and an abundance of hope. These are the gifts that he gives to us. That's the abundance that he gives us. He gives us a place that we can go where we actually feel full and satisfied, being led into those pastures. He's going to take care of us in those places. Jesus also mentions that he has other sheep. Now, at first I kind of skipped over this. He had some other sheep, so he's got another paddock up the back, and he's got some other sheep up there, and eventually they bring them in. I was reading one commentary by a guy, Ken Hughes, and Ken goes, "This is us." I thought, yeah, this is pretty cool. This is us. If you read through the scriptures, at times it can feel like God is telling this story about the nation of Israel. He's telling the story of the Jewish people. The story goes through and talks about the Jews. Where are we in that story? We get kind of towards the end parts of the Bible and we find out about the Gentiles and say that. But in this particular passage, Jesus is talking directly about us. That we are the other sheep. We weren't Jews. We weren't born at this time when the Bible was being written. We weren't born in this story. We weren't there listening to Jesus. But he's saying, look, you guys, you belong to me as well. I'm going to bring you in as well. This isn't just restricted to those who were present at the time. It isn't just restricted to the Jews. It's for all of us. And that makes me feel pretty special to know that Jesus, 2,000 years ago, was talking about me, my family, those around us, those in this congregation, and saying, hey, you guys get to come in as well. And I think that's one of the things I look forward to. Heaven kind of messes with my head sometimes. I'm like, eternity, how does that work? It just doesn't fit so well in my head all the time. One of the things I look forward to is just getting to talk to a whole bunch of people. What was it like? What was it like what you were doing? I read about you in the Bible. Did you really say that? Or did you really do that? Or did they just give you a bit of a bad rap? Or did you inflate yourself? What happened? Why were you thinking this at the time? What was that like? How do we compare those things? So look forward to that time as we gather as believers. That's what Jesus saying. We're going to bring you all in together. All the sheep from the place. And to finish up, Jesus says a couple of other things in this passage. He talks about laying down his life. He's again and again throughout the time, he's giving these analogies. He's saying, look, I'm going to lay down my life. That's what a good shepherd does. A good shepherd lies in the gateway and protects the sheep, in his case from the wolves. In our cases, it would be from the foxes. Not quite as tough as the wolves were at those points in time. But he says he lays down his life. The hired worker gets up and runs away. Because he's got nothing on the line. He can just turn around and go away. But the good shepherd, he feels an ownership for the sheep. He doesn't want to go back home without all his sheep, so he's going to lay down his life, and that's what Jesus does. And he says he lays it down freely. No one compelled him to do this. He laid it down freely. When Jesus is being taken to be crucified, one of the things he says, disciples like, no one can take me against my will. He says, I've got a legion of angels, 10,000 angels at my disposal. Now, if you read through parts of the Old Testament, you'll see what happens when one angel turns up. It gets ugly really quickly, right? Angels are very tough. No one can stand up to an angel. And he's going, look, I've got 10,000 of them. And I've often wondered what it was like for the angels. I particularly think about Michael as an angel. Michael, who was in charge of the heavenly hosts, right, the battle commander. What was it like for him to watch the Son of God that he was charged to protect be led away to his death? It must have been so hard for him to say, look, I've got to step back because Jesus told me I cannot intervene, I can't come in. But at any point, Jesus could have walked away from his own death. He didn't have to die. There's a choice that he made. And so here he refers that again and again. I've chosen to give up my life for you. No one's taking it from me. No one's forcing me to do this. It's a choice that I've made. And he gives up his life. And he says, but I'm going to take it back again. And in verse, when he does, he's going to also give us the same thing. The same resurrection, the bringing back from the dead. The final piece I'll leave with is just this idea of the good shepherd. In the translations, a good shepherd. And I thought, what is good? At one point, somebody calls Jesus good teacher, and he says, don't call me good teacher. The word good in this context can also be translated as beautiful. And I think what a picture of a man is a beautiful shepherd. A beautiful thing in all ways. Willing to die for his sheep, willing to take them into the best pastures, willing to protect them, willing to care for them, willing to rebuke them when time comes. There are things that sheep do, right, you don't want them to do. He's willing to do that for us, to keep us back in line. Sometimes you say, why we've got to do that? Because sometimes you need some nudge. You need the crook, the shepherd hits you, a little bit of a tap to get you back in line. Or if you've been around sheepdogs, a little bit of a nip in the heels to get you back where you're supposed to go. Jesus does all those things for us because we're his sheep. Now, if you're not one of his sheep or you're not sure one of his sheep, please talk to one of us afterwards because he says that he freely welcomes us in. He freely welcomes us in when we want to come in. If we're his fold, we're freely welcomed in. We need to listen to his voice. I encourage you that if you don't, through the course of the week, get a chance to either listen to the Bible or watch a show that has a Bible on it. Craig has some great resources for that, or read the Bible. Talk to other Christians, pray together, share these things, talk about what it's like, and reflect on these things. God, I thank you that you are the Good Shepherd. I thank you that you've led us into beautiful pastures. Lord, I thank you that you care for us as we can't care for ourselves well. Thank you that you've called us, even these 2,000 years later, called us into your fold. We pray that we can be obedient to your voice. Amen.